Hey guys, welcome back to another vlog. Today we are restocking some clay. If you guys are new here, hey guys, this is Annie. I am a cold porcelain clay artist. I make things to keep my inner child happy and hopefully give you all a little serotonin boost. I also have a small business called Sugarcafecharms where I sell my handmade clay creations, and as a lot of you guys might already know that I make my own clay at home. Now I have already shared how you can make your own clay in a previous video. I will link that in the description so that you can check that out. And today we are making clay again while I give you guys some of the biggest tips to make perfect cold porcelain every time you're making it. So yeah, let's get started. So basic components of cold porcelain is PVA glue and cornstarch, as you guys might already know. Other two component is oil and preservative. So these are added to increase the shelf life or to make the texture better. So first, I'm going to discuss about each of these components while I make the clay. Okay, coming straight to point, the first tip is use a PVA based glue. This type of glue is also called craft glue, and the reason why I'm specifying this is because PVA glue is available in other versions like wood glue and synthetic glue. However, they dry way too fast, which might lead to cracks. The next step is always measure out the oil and the vinegar that you are going to add to the clay. The volume of both of these should be 1/8 of the total amount of glue you are using, and adding too much or too little of any of these two components can change the texture a lot. For example, adding too little vinegar can lead to molds as it works as a preservative, and if you add too much oil, it will separate, making it difficult to work with. So always measure both of these ingredients out. Tip number 3 is to add a little bit of white acrylic color to your clay. This is added to counter the natural yellowness of cold porcelain. I recommend using a thinner consistency acrylic paint as compared to the tube ones. From my experience, whenever I added thick acrylic paints, the texture was not soft enough. So I have been using this brand called Fevicryl because it's fairly liquidy and mixes very well with the clay. If you skip the white paint, then your clay will turn out translucent and slightly yellowish, which I don't like. But if you're going for that translucent look, you can totally skip it. Before we mix everything, here is a random tip that I'm giving. So I always use coconut oil to make my clay, and there are a couple of reasons why. Firstly, coconut oil is proven to have antifungal properties, so it prevents molds. Secondly, it has a fairly strong smell, so it cuts out the weird smell of PVA glue, which I know a lot of you guys find irritating. Okay, that was pretty random, but it works really well for me, so I wanted to share. Anyways, moving on. Next, I'm using a rubber spatula to mix everything up. I feel like it's very convenient to use this, especially in the later stages, and you will see what I'm talking about. Anyways, moving on, tip number 4 is to mix all the liquid components first before adding the dry components, and I do this to avoid lumps as much as I can because sometimes they tend to lump together in one area. Next, we need to add the starch, and here is tip number 5. I always recommend using packaged cornstarch as compared to loose cornstarch. Loose cornstarch might be cheaper, but it always has a chance of cross-contamination, which might lead to molds. Packaged cornstarch is always a lot more cleaner and more refined, and even the texture with this is a lot better than the loose cornstarch. Now that you know about the components, tip number 6 would be to follow the measurement and the quantities. We are trying to make a clay and not a potion. Here is the measurement and quantity that you would need to follow. So I am giving you both the cup measurement as well as the weight measurement so that you can measure it however you want, but please use some kind of measurement. Don't eyeball it. Don't think that I can just guess how much I am adding. It won't work that way. So use this cup measurements or a weighing scale. Okay, now that we have mixed everything together into a homogeneous mixture, we can move on to our next step, which is heating the clay, and you can either use a microwave or a stove to do this, and I have both the videos available on my channel, so check them out. In both methods though, patience is the key. For example, if you're doing it on the stove, use the lowest heat setting and stir continuously. Similarly, if you're doing it in the microwave, do it at 10 to 20 second intervals and stir very well before putting it back in the microwave. I would be doing it in the microwave because it's easier for me, and I will be reporting back after each interval, so let's go. As the clay heats up, I want to introduce you to one of my favorite platforms, which is Craftsy. Craftsy is your online resource for everything creative. It has over 2000 classes in over 20 creative topics for all levels. This includes crochet, sketching, painting, baking, cake decorating, and honestly so much more. And the classes are led by talented and friendly award-winning instructors, which make the whole process so much more easy and fun. And the instructions are always so clear. With over 2000 classes, you will never run out of ideas, and no matter if you're watching it for fun, refining a hobby, or just learning a new skill altogether, Craftsy has got you covered in all of these. And as a person with many different hobbies, I can guarantee that Craftsy is definitely a jackpot. By the way, I have been taking their baking classes because if you guys don't know, I am so passionate about baking things, and the instructor of this class seems like the sweetest person ever. And if you're wondering, Craftsy also has downloadable resources, making it even more easier to learn. So this year, if you are wanting to learn a new hobby or refine your old hobby and want to learn from award-winning professional instructors from the comfort of your own home, then definitely check out Craftsy. And the best part is, the first 1000 people to use the link in my description to join Craftsy will get a full year of premium membership for just $1.49, or you can scan this QR. Offer is valid only for new members. Thank you so much Craftsy for sponsoring today's video and supporting our channel. And now let's get back to the video. After the first 20 seconds in the microwave, this is how our mixture is looking. It has formed a thin skin on top but does not look too different. Tip number 7 is, even though it does not look too different, you should mix it evenly before putting it back in the microwave to ensure that everything is evenly heated. After repeating the process 3 more times, my clay started to clump up together like this, and when your clay starts doing this, this is your sign to slow down. If you are doing it in the stove, then remove it from the heat completely and continue stirring. In case of microwave, reduce the interval timing from 20 seconds to 10 seconds. After heating it for 20 more seconds, this is how the clay is looking. At this stage, the clay is still hot and should still be sticky. The best way to test this out is to take a little bit of the mixture on your finger, and it should be slightly sticky. However, it should be completely non-sticky to your palms, and that's when you know that it's ready for the next step, which is kneading. Next step is to knead the clay while the clay is still warm. I am wearing gloves and adding a little bit of cornstarch on my surface because the clay at this point is still sticky, but as we knead this and as the clay cools down, it will automatically become non-sticky. It's kind of important that you knead the clay while it's still hot, because as it cools down, it starts to form a thin skin on the surface, making the clay very dry to work with. Doing it this way will make sure that you get a soft, fluffy ball of clay. At this point, the clay should be completely non-sticky. The best way to know that your clay is perfectly made is when you roll it up into a big circle and it does not really form any crack, or do the teardrop test like this. If it forms a smooth teardrop just like this, then congratulations, you have made your perfect cold porcelain. But today, I am making a very controversial statement here. Honestly, whenever the clay forms a perfect teardrop, I find it too difficult to sculpt anything. So I always end up adding more starch to make the consistency a little bit thicker. But yesterday, I made a mistake of accidentally adding too much starch, and that resulted in a very stiff batch of clay which I kept in the left side. Now one batch of clay is way too soft and one batch is way too stiff. And the best way to save both of these is to mix them together. So this is my next tip, that if you have made a faulty batch of clay, just mix it with another batch of clay. For example, if you have accidentally made a stiff batch of clay, just make another batch of clay which is a little softer and mix it together, and do the opposite if necessary. I have done this so many times and it works out perfectly every time. Okay, so this is how our clay was looking like, which formed a perfect teardrop. But as I said, I don't really like that consistency. It's honestly way too soft and also leaves this weird dents at the back of my charms. But now our teardrop looks like this, which I call a broken teardrop. It's still a rough teardrop, but it's not as smooth, and this is the perfect consistency that I like. Now that our clay is made, the only thing left is to store it. Most people wrap this in a plastic wrap, but I personally don't like that method. The plastic actually does not allow the moisture to come out at all, so the water content sometimes condenses on the surface of the clay, making the top slightly sticky. and might also lead to molds because of the excess moisture. So what I like to do is to add a little bit of oil on the surface of the clay and then store it in a airtight container. This way the water will have more room to escape, so this increases the shelf life and even the texture of this will be better. So now I will let it rest for 24 hours and tomorrow it will be ready to use. The last step for today is going to be let the clay rest for at least 24 hours before using it to get the best texture. Honestly, at this point, I don't even know how many tips I shared, but I just really hope that you find it helpful. Okay, so before I end, I just want to answer some of the most asked question about cold porcelain. It's kind of like a quick Q&A about cold porcelain. I actually made a full note of all the questions. So why did I choose cold porcelain and why I do not use polymer clay? So to answer that, I actually made my first ever batch of cold porcelain in hopes that once I get a little bit of money, I will switch to polymer clay. However, I fell in love with the texture of this clay. I also love the fact that it's an air dry clay. It's a cheaper alternative to polymer clay. So I just kept using it and I never switched to polymer clay. The second question is, how long can we store cold porcelain clay? Cold porcelain can be easily stored for 7 to 8 months. However, as I said before as well, I would recommend you to use it within 2-3 months because it's an air dry clay. It has a lot of moisture, so it might lead to molds. Secondly, it might dry up as you keep it, so just use it up within 2 to 3 months. That would be my recommendation. Third is, can cold porcelain catch molds? And the answer to that is yes. Personally, I have never experienced it. I think there was only one time where just a portion of that clay started to get a little bit of fungus, and that's because I did not use it for like 8-9 months. So after that I saw that there was a small patch of fungus, but it never happened that the whole batch got spoiled. So that is something that did not happen to me. But if you have ever experienced that, that is completely normal. Like even pottery clay catches mold. Any type of air dry clay has a lot of moisture, so it's very normal for them to catch molds. Even some of the industrially made things like gouache paints, for example, and even polymer clay sometimes catch molds. So it's not that unusual, but you should store it properly just to make sure that it does not catch molds, because it's not that nice. Fourth is cold porcelain clay heavy? Cold porcelain clay is very lightweight and it's usually even lighter than polymer clay, and that's why many people who make like things like figurines, they usually use cold porcelain clay, so it's very light. The next question is, do we need to glaze cold porcelain? I would recommend to glaze your clay creations because cold porcelain clay is a air dry clay and also it's a water based clay, which means that if it comes in contact with moisture, it will slowly start to disintegrate. So just to protect everything, I definitely would recommend you to glaze it with something. I personally use resin. I think that is the best thing that you can use, but there are many other alternatives as well, like lacquer spray. You can also use Mod Podge, but definitely get some kind of sealant to seal all the details and to keep your charms long lasting. The next question is cold porcelain strong enough? And the answer to that is yes. It is in fact very strong. So cold porcelain is actually even stronger than polymer clay, which is something that my friends who use polymer clay, who have tried cold porcelain as well, have said to me. So cold porcelain is kind of very flexible, so it will bend but it will not break. But I'm not saying that it's not unbreakable. If you apply a lot of force, of course it will break, but usually it's strong enough. Like sometimes I have thrown charms across the room and it did not break, so you don't have to worry about it breaking that easily. Okay, I think this will be the last question. Okay, so the last question is how to get rid of fingerprints. The speciality about cold porcelain is that it is a self-smoothing clay. So when you are sculpting it, you might see fingerprints, okay? But as soon as you leave it for a few minutes, you will see that the fingerprints or any small little cracks, they will slowly go away. It's kind of like the magic of cold porcelain. But if you have any stubborn fingerprints that is just not going away, you can just take a Q-tip or earbuds and just dip it in some cold water and gently rub it over that area to take away that fingerprint. I have been seeing a lot of people using acetone to get rid of the fingerprints or the dust, and I have never used that, to be honest. But for me, I always use water, just a little bit of cold water, and that works perfectly fine for me to take away any of the dust or any of the fingerprints that might be there. So yeah, that will be the last question for this video. I hope you really enjoyed. I really enjoyed making the clay with you guys while yapping about this clay. I am very passionate about sharing the details about this clay because a lot of people seem to underestimate it. So I am just very passionate about spreading it to the rest of the world. So yeah, with this batch of clay we will design our next collection. This next collection is going to be inspired by summer and spring. It will just have a lot of fruits and lot of colors and flowers. So I'm really excited about that because I have a lot of designs in mind. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope you guys are too. If you have any further questions, please leave them in the comments and I will be happy to solve them for you guys. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care and always keep your inner child happy. Bye guys.